Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another very special, intriguing episode of Speak to the Mic, the unapologetically Black, uncensored, unfiltered podcast show. I am your illustrious host, Marlon Joseph, and after a much-needed vacation and restoration and relaxation that I've taken in recent weeks, I am back to provide the following things to you. Provide information and content to the Black community, talk to Black men and women of all professions, industries, and organizations about the work they do, and to give acknowledgement and flowers to those Black men and women who are making truly an impact using their professions, platforms, and positions of power to help move the culture forward in a more positive way. Joining me today, and before I even get started with the introduction, I want to make sure y'all out there listening, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button to my YouTube channel, as well as Spotify and all other podcast platforms, because this is the type of content that's truly for the culture, that's truly for the Black people in our community. I want to see us be the change that we all want to ultimately see in our everyday lives, and even for future generations as well. Joining me today are two very good friends of mine from the Alma Mater, from my alma mater, Russ College. Shout out to Russ College. By their fruits ye shall know them. We have an illustrious HBCU that produces some very, very, very intelligent Black men and women who have come from there in all different professions and industries in the world, making a huge impact in their professions. Joining me today is a very good friend of mine, very good friends of mine, one of which was my roommate back at Russ, where we used to have a lot of these conversations about the very things that we want to see happen in the Black community and the very things that we want to obviously contribute to when it comes to the advancement of colored people in general. Dr. Anthony Thompson, who is a veteran secondary educator, a Black history lecturer, and an Afrocentric Education Advocate. Also, my good brother, Dr. Lewis Henderson, who is a public school educator as well. Brothers, thank you all. Thank both of you so much for being on this show to talk about this. We're, bringing up this topic about Juneteenth. And before we even get started, happy Juneteenth to all my Black people. Happy Father's Day as well to everyone. All my Black fathers, Black Fathers Matter. Those of you who are making true and huge impacts in your children's lives, regardless of what the system may say, regardless of what issues or problems that you may even endure in your own personal lives, you're making sure that you're being selfless enough to make the sacrifices and necessary adjustments to make sure that your children are growing up with their fathers, because fathers in general are very essential to the growth and development of their children's lives and the communities in which they live in. So again, talk to me about Juneteenth. So for those of you who are not too familiar with the new federal holiday that just got passed, maybe a year or two ago?
Yeah.
Juneteenth marks the day, June 19th, 1865, which is obviously the shirt that I'm wearing today, commemorates the day that in Galveston, Texas, a huge number of slaves at the time who were still working as slaves did not know that they were free until it was announced to them in Galveston, Texas, down there in the town area, what may have you, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. And so they were free, but majority of slaves during that time did not even know they were even free. And so it was announced to them that they were free at that very moment in time. Free-ish. Free is a term free is a very operative word. I'll say that to say the least, but technically free from the shackles of having a slave master, a slave owner, if you will, and working for free. Some would even argue that even today, there's different forms of slavery that still exist, but that's from a systemic institutional racism perspective. And so joining me today, like I said, two good friends of mine who will be talking to me about Juneteenth. Dr. Thompson, my brother.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to start with you on this question. How do I even phrase this question? So in light of the fact that Juneteenth has now become a federal holiday, would you say that this is a clear inclination that America is taking a step in the right direction when it comes to acknowledging Black history?
I think that it is, man. Coming from an educator's point of view, if you are an educator that's worth your own salt, especially, in the urban areas within the United States, you're going to be encountered with students from all multicultural backgrounds. Even wherever you're teaching at now, even in the rural areas. When I was teaching in Holly Springs, I had some Hispanic students. I didn't even think they resided in Holly Springs, Mississippi, but they were there. You know what I mean? I think I had like two Asian kids in my classes. So I thought that was a little, because I never seen them in Holly Springs. So, but I say all of that to say that if you work your own salt, you've been teaching about this stuff already. You know what I'm saying? If you're a teacher of Black kids, if you're you teach about this. If you're a teacher of Hispanic kids, you've been teaching about Cinco de Mayo. You know what I mean? If you're a teacher of Asian kids, you talk about how the arrival of them at Angel Island and Ellis Island. You've been teaching about these things already and how they help to establish America and make America the place that it is. However, to say that we're moving in the right direction, I would say so. Yes. This is just another one of those symbol things, that says that America is now recognizing the dark past, the things they did not want to talk about. You know what I mean? And I think that acknowledgement is one thing, but then to commemorate is another. And that's just showing that there's an appreciation for one particular group's struggle and culture. And like I've done in my own research, and I'm pretty sure Lewis can say the same because I looked into some of his research, is that once students of all racial backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds, once they can begin to see and appreciate their own culture, they can begin to appreciate other people's cultures as well. But they have Absolutely. To be taught their own culture first, primarily. Absolutely. It's like like a kid can't appreciate what happens with the immigrants and what's happening with everybody else until they understand what happened to them. And so it's that appreciation helps us not only to identify with other groups of people and their struggles and successes, but also help them when they encounter struggles and successes. So I think this is a good start, but I think there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that too, especially given the level of urgency it is to know your history first before knowing the history and culture and heritage of other races and things of that nature. But it's to be multicultural in that way, right? So you want to make sure that you're very mindful and respectful of what everyone's heritage consists of, and obviously incorporating that, especially given that America is a multicultural country.
It is.
It consists of many facets of different heritages and different cultures and races. So the fact that we were stripped of that for many, many years, and we're starting to obviously advocate more for our history to be taught in the classroom, which I'll be getting to my other point in regards to that particular aspect of it. But I do appreciate the fact that you said that in order to really truly understand what the culture or what's being celebrated at this very moment, you have to first understand the origin of your own and understand the origin of others as well. Lewis, to you, what does this federal holiday signify for you? I mean, what does it mean for the federal government to basically announce just a year or two ago that Juneteenth is now a national holiday? What does that mean to you?
Well, it means a lot, but I'm going to backdrop on some of the things that Dr. Thompson just stated. And one of those things that he stated was the ability for students to not only learn their own culture, but cultures of others. So through my research, I've looked at the research of Zaretta Hammond, Gloria Lansing Billings.
Oh, yeah.
Geneva Gray, even, I wouldn't say that much, but Principal Kafeli has done a little bit of research on culturally relevant instruction and culturally relevant teaching, but mostly it's been Geneva Gray, Lansing Billings, and Zaretta Hammond. And they all say the same thing. When students learn their own culture, they have the ability to appreciate cultures of other students, which in time is going to build relationships. And so if you build a relationship and you have an understanding of your culture, it's going to help you understand other students' cultures. So for America to put an emphasis on Juneteenth, I think it's a great start.
Mm-hmm.
based on our conversation that we had off screen, we all know that we'll never be fully in agreements that America has done enough, or Blacks have done enough, or whites have done enough. But it's a start, and it's a good start.
Yeah.
But I agree with Anthony wholeheartedly that people, and I have to answer, I have to preface all my answers to the questions from a person from a K through 12 standpoint, because that's what I do. I teach public school, and
Absolutely.
The state that I'm in, we have different views. So I have to be mindful of what I say and how I answer the questions. But I think it's a great start, but it goes off into building relationships. And I'll just tell you a little story. I had a student in my class this past year. She was from Yemen. And in the cafeteria, she would always sit by herself and she would never eat. So I had her the last block of the day. So like on Fridays when my students do something good, I have like a treasure trove of Takis in my room. So she would always be the first person in my room. As soon as the bell rings, she come in. And so I just asked her, I said, hey, student A, why don't you never eat? Like, you're in the cafeteria, you never eat. So then she said, well, Mr. Henderson, I'm a Muslim. The way the school is constructed, now she didn't say constructed, I'm saying constructed, but she just said the setup of the food of what we eat in the cafeteria, we eat a lot of pork. We eat a lot of, and she said, because of my culture, because of my heritage, I can't really eat like that. And I'm gonna be honest with you, seeing her sit by herself for pretty much half the year, it kind of really started my research on researching culture relevant instruction and how it ties into helping other students' culture. Like, I'm with Anthony. I worked in Gulfport and I had a slew of Hispanic, Latinx students. But it hit me different from when I met her, because she was the only one out of almost 1,000 students. And she stood out because she wouldn't fold on her cultural beliefs. Whether I agree with her beliefs or not, she stood firm on it.
Right.
So it's people saying is that it's a start, because it gives you an opportunity to accept other people and accept where they come from.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, and I'm all for that too, right? So, but I think that personally, I feel like because of generations of the past have made progress in certain areas, but then if you look at where we are now, we're still at a standstill when it comes to certain instances of what progress truly looks like for us today, in today's time. I do somewhat feel like we oftentimes get too complacent with the little progress that we make, right? It's like we're sitting here. We oftentimes, I've been very much so mindful of this and saying this on record on this show before, about how we get too fixated with symbolic gestures and a token of symbolism here and there. Oh, this person is the first to do this. We're still living in a time, Lewis and Anthony, that we're still the first Black somebody to do something. This is 2022 now, and we still don't have full representation in all facets, all professions, all industries of life, right? Especially in this country. And so from that, given the fact that we built this country on our backs, blood, sweat, and tears, and on our own fibers of our own being, we should be given much more acknowledgement and obviously recognition for the very work that we've done. Because without us, this country wouldn't be where it is in terms of infrastructure, because in terms of manufacturing, in terms of the production of things that have been recognized and invented and produced. And
right.
It can go on and on about that. But my point is, and this is my next question to you guys, I want to start with you on this, Lewis, since you brought it up. Do we get too fixated on symbolic gestures? Why or why not?
Good question. You kind of stumped me for a minute, but I guess it depends on the person and your personal viewpoint and your personal perspective. You know, being a public school educator, my students would often say there's issues, there are problems in their community, things they want to address. They want to address the teen problems with teen shootings. They want to address the drug problem. And I guess it really caveats back to what Dr. Thompson said. It's one thing to talk about something, but then after you talk, you have to put a ball, you have to put something in motion. And one of the reasons why it might be hard for progress to happen, not just for Blacks, but for all minorities in America that are looked or viewed as a minority, is that we have to be willing to work together and band together, even if we don't agree with everything or every viewpoint somebody has.
Man,
a lot of times when a person is given that pushback because a person doesn't necessarily have the same viewpoints, we automatically put ourselves in the box and say, hey, I can't help person A. And so in turn, that stops progress.
It does. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And so, Anthony, for you, because we talked about this before, right? When it comes to being monolithic, by nature, I mean, we were once a monolithic people. We were to an
or
extent.
at least classified as such. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and I feel like we've gotten so far away from that to now we're Xeroxing the Xeroxers. We were the originators of being we started every single thing, right? So when you think about it, everything positive for the most part. And so now we're copying the copies, the other races, the other ethnicities that copied from us. Now we're copying from them, copying from us. It makes entirely no sense. We're going ass backwards and wondering why we're not making the true progress we should make up to this point. Because for me personally, as a millennial, as we are, I do feel like in my heart of hearts, one of my philosophies is each and every generation should have their own list of shit that they have to fix and not have to be fixated on the previous generation's issues. And I feel like it's not enough time in a lifetime to fix the previous generation's issues and ours as well. It's too much in one lifetime. And I feel like we are in a very obligated state in this particular point in time to be that generation that puts a halt to that, where we're now moving forward. The next generation under us is going to have their own list of things that they have to sort through and figure out and fix. Because again, nothing is 100%. No one is perfect. I'm not asking for the world or this country to be perfect. What I am asking for is for us to be better. I'm asking for the country to treat us better. And I'm asking for us to treat each other's better too. So, and for you, Anthony, do we, like, for example, when I brought up the whole symbolic gesture aspect of it, so obviously with Kamala Harris being the first Madam Vice President, Black woman and woman Vice President, with Barack being the first Black president, with Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson being the first Black woman Supreme Court Justice on the bench, right? So these different things we have deemed as success, and they are a great deal of success, but only if there is substance to the work they're doing on behalf of Black people, because representation only matters when that work is being put forth, even on behalf of our agenda. And if it's not being done, then it's just the Black face still holding the same agenda that has always been held. So your business point, what do you think about that?
Okay, man, brother, you said a whole lot. Dr. Henderson, you gave a great answer. But oh man, it's so much stuff. So the framework to which you gave was sociological when you started talking about the millennial. So I'll try to work around that framework. Okay. So it's functionalist. And if you Black folks not being monolithic, and at least not by today's standards, since we kind of broken into these many factions, and Dr. Henderson, Lewis brought up the idea that, you know what I'm saying, we're going to have to work together with other minorities and kind of sacrifice some of our own successes for the greater good to get beyond these struggles. I got posed a question as far as from a functionalist standpoint. If something isn't working for the greater good, it isn't good for all of them in the first place. If you got this, I know you are more of a science man than me and Lewis is combined. So if you got a watch, if you got a clock, and one of the cogs isn't working to keep time going, if one of the cogs is not working to keep time going, then wouldn't you just go ahead and just take that clog out? You understand what I'm saying? Like it just wasn't work. But that's just something to think about, because I don't think that it's not by design that there are some issues within our community that we don't, within the minority community, Black, Asian, Hispanic, that I think that just based on history itself, just based on the policies that they passed with not wanting history and minority studies to be taught in public schools. I think that that's by design. They don't want us to share a common ancestry, not a common ancestry, but they don't want us to share a common struggle. They don't want us to share a common success, because that no longer makes Blacks, Asian, and Hispanics minorities. That makes us now majority. And that gives us and now that we are equipped with that knowledge and in that power, then what ends up happening is that makes us all into real policy makers. We'll be able to take all of that information and you know what I'm saying, put our resources together, and now we have a common goal, and then we all do become to a degree monolithic, regardless if you're conservative or liberal or radical or moderate in your approach. There are some very common things to which we all can agree upon, as far as we all need to have some money to be able to feed our families. So we all need to have good wages. We all need to have an adequate amount of education and equity in education. And, you know, we all have to have all of these very basic things. We agree upon those and how to get to it. We're going to be forced to be reckoned with as minorities in this country. So I don't think that it's not by design. And so when you talk about it being symbolic, Juneteenth and it being commemorated as a holiday, yeah, you know what I'm saying? We got to, like Dr. Henderson said, yeah, we're here. You know what I'm saying? And it's appreciative that you recognize, you know what I'm saying? But we got a whole long way to go before we can actually, you know what I'm saying, see beyond just this symbol of, yay, they gave us a holiday. No, let's turn now. Now we got this holiday. Now we need to start making some policies. Now that we got Barack Obama in there, he did all of what he could do. Now that we got Kamala in there, we're seeing all what she can't do. Now that we had, our Supreme Court justice in there, and we're seeing that she's up against the odds with having a vote on what direction the country could go with as far as certain laws is concerned. But even in our own communities, even in our own households, we have to be able to, like Dr. Henderson said with his daughters, like you said with your son and daughter the other day, we had our conversation. We got to raise them and make them into the next generation changes. We have to take our students that we have in our classrooms and make them into the next generation of policy changes and agents of change within the communities to which they come from. And that's when we start moving in the forward direction. I don't know if I answered your question, bro, but that
you did it in its entirety. And so, and it leads me to my other question. But before I get to my other question, I want to kind of piggyback off something you said about that. So obviously with it starting at home, right? We do have to be the first examples that our children see, right? And then being able to help them understand what the world is like versus what the world should be like versus what the world really is, right? We have to get to that place where perception is not necessarily reality, because just because it's what it is not always, and we know in reality that it's not always about what it is, but it's about what it looks like. And so from a symbolic standpoint, I do feel like, okay, we jump for joy. We over celebrate the idea of now having another Black person in representation of us in these particular positions of power, but yet almost seem like they're powerless when it comes to having enough support around them to make sure that those laws are being legislated on our behalf. But even to that point, I've always been of the mindset that we put too much stock in politicians to do what they're supposed to do, when we have to always put fire underneath their ass to make them do these things. They're not going to do anything on their own free will and their own genuine concern for the people. They have to be put to, we have to put pressure on them to do those things in order for these types of change to actually happen. And so the standpoint about Juneteenth being a holiday, it's still companies that's still fighting in this very country that's still not celebrating it. So it's only what, a year or two removed from being a federal holiday, but yet it's still pushback about that health. It's still pushback in the state of Arizona to even recognize Dr. King as a holiday. Right. They have certain states that still don't recognize Dr. King for being a national holiday, a federal holiday. And it speaks to the very progress that we're not truly making. We're making some, but I feel like we've been too fixated on the some and knowing that it's not enough. It's not. Yeah. We can be doing more. We should be doing more.
Think about it like this.
More should be done for us as well.
Right. And just think about it like this, man. We got the holiday before even people was even able to learn about it in schools.
Absolutely. Most of
They
us
gave
didn't
us, they
know
gave us
about
a holiday,
Juneteenth in its
but then
entirety.
they don't want teachers to teach about it.
And
You know what I'm saying? So
that leads to my
there's
next
some things
question.
that need to be
See, this is
changed.
why we were roommates, ladies and gentlemen. Me and Anthony have had these conversations many, many times, many, many years. Shout out to my boys, Kentrell, Boyd. Shout out to my boy, TJ Williams. Shout out to my boys. Who am I missing?
It was a few of us. Louis
It
used
was
to be
so
out
many
there
of
too.
us. We've
Al
had
Brothers
these,
are
ladies
gone.
and gentlemen, for you all listening, we've had these discussions so many years, so many times back in our undergrad years. We would sit and talk in the dorm rooms, in the lobby, outside the dorms, outside the cafeteria. We would be talking about the very change we want to see in this world. What's wrong with the world at that current state? This was almost 15 fucking years ago. And
Yeah.
we're still suffering from the same situations today that we were around that time. And so that's leading to my next question. In regards to Juneteenth being a national holiday, you would think this would be much more of just a tiny step in the right direction, but more of a leap towards that. But despite the fact that Juneteenth is part of Black history, and Black history is obviously it cohorts with critical race theory. How is it for you guys? I'll start with you on this one, Anthony.
Okay.
How is it that you're gonna one, tell us you're gonna acknowledge Juneteenth as a national holiday, but you're eliminating the very Black history that is in parallel with what Juneteenth stands for? How are you able to address in your school district, or in your school preferably, how are you able to address the idea that Black history is being taken out of schools?
Well, yeah, I live in a red state with a blue county. And so
that sounds like me.
Yeah. And so, it's real interesting. But I'll say this, man. And like the initial premise that I initially gave, a social studies teacher or a ELA teacher or anybody that deals with content dealing with people, and where history will come up. If you work for your own salt, you're gonna be teaching some of this stuff anyway, regardless of what a policy says or not. And you're gonna at least know how that it could be sensitive to some people and not so sensitive to others. So you'll kind of know how to deliver the information. However, I'll tell you a story about teaching at Holly Springs High School. I had a principal that was the stern principal, man. I won't say his name because for obvious reasons, stuff like that. But he's a good guy, and I'm not telling a bad story. I guess I could say his name, but I just won't say his name, because I don't want stuff to happen. But he was a great principal, man. But he was so stern, and we were up for SACS accreditation, which is, I think it's changed its name. Some states still have SACS accreditation, other states don't. But it's like Southern Accreditation Committee's Symposium or something like that. And basically, they had to make sure schools were doing all of what they said they were doing, otherwise they would lose accreditation, and they also lose state funding. And then they had to, they would be under the control of the state if they didn't do X, Y, and Z. So anyway, I remember my first year teaching. I'm coming out of Stovall class, so I'm hot and ready, right? And I'm like,
Stovall get you now. Shout out to Stovall, will be on the show too. Hey,
I'm thinking I'm going to change the world, right? And do all of these things and, be extra super Black. And I was highly misinformed, but that's another conversation. But what I will say is that I did this activity where I would do like a Black figure. And I would have these black and white photos all across my classroom, and the students had to guess who they were, and they would get extra credit points. And every day I'd give like 1 or 2 facts so they can look them up on the Google encyclopedia or whatever, until they understood who the person was. Well, my principal walks in the class about the week before accreditation, and he goes, "You got to take all that down." And I'm applauded. Like, I'm like, here you are, this Black man, and you telling me to take down these Black images. I didn't understand it at the time. And so I remember going to Dr. Stovall and going, "Man, what's up with my principal? He's crazy telling me to take down these Black images. 90% of the students to which I'm teaching is Black. I don't get it." And so, Stovall told me, "Man, you got to slide this information in there. You just can't give it to them flat out on the platter like that. You have to slide it in." So I didn't understand it at the time. But as a seasoned educator now, I understand that what he was doing was saving the school. There will be no school for these kids to learn any of this information in if you don't get it accredited. So school got to stay accredited. So
the school got to exist, and so in order for school
got
you got to play their politics. You have to play their politics, their game. You know what I mean? You have to do that.
So here we are in 2021, 2022, still talking about where critical race theory is taught. First and foremost, a lot of educators don't even know what it is. Surveys is already proven.
I had him on the show to talk about critical race theory and what it actually means versus what the fear-mongering tactic is being spewed out there in terms of what white people or what Republicans preferably think that it actually means, which is to teach white kids to hate themselves because of their ancestors own slavery. That is not what critical race theory means at all. But I'll get to that.
And trust me, that was my government. That was my governor here in Florida who made the statement that's often quoted. So trust me, I get it. But now here we are in this grand scheme and dealing with critical race theory and teaching of Black history. Most states in the United States, and there's something called NSSG, where there's these national social studies, NSSG, National Social Studies Standards. And I forgot what the G stand for, but basically, or if there's a G in there, but there's so many standards that's supposed to be taught. This law was passed back in, I think this was passed back in like 2000, I want to say like 99. You know what I mean? So before any of us even got out of high school, there was things that social studies teachers were mandated to teach. Here in the state of Florida, in 2001, there was a law that said African-American history must be taught. Most states have something like that, whether it be at a museum, whether it be in the public school system, it has to be given some recognition or some credit in some educational setting. And so what they're doing with this passage of this law that's making it uncomfortable for them to feel like they're threatened in the classroom or professional setting or what have you is reactionary politics. So when there was this Juneteenth law passed, most people don't realize this, but before CRT was even a thing, Juneteenth was already getting ready to be established as a state law, as a state holiday, as a national holiday, as a United States holiday, this national holiday. And then as a reaction to that, these other winged politics folks, these ultra conservative politics folks, was like, oh, since they're going to do that, then this make it, then we're going to pass this. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to, and the thing is, it doesn't say anything about not teaching Black history, because if you do it the right way, all you're doing as an educator, I'm not telling kids what to think. I'm telling them how to think. What they come of the information to which I present to them, that's entirely up to them and the community to which they come from. You know what I'm saying? And so,
knowledge being shared. You're sharing the knowledge with them. Now, whether you apply that to your everyday life is up to you. But I've done my part with educating and enlightening you on what reality and what the education is.
Exactly. So that's that's how I deal with it as an educator. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to give you the facts. I don't care if I was in a classroom full of white children. I'm giving you this information regardless. You got to get this because I'm trying to I need to give you this information because it is true history. And two, I don't want you to leave not knowing the entire truth of anything. I'm going to give you the good, the bad of Black history. I'm going to give you the good and bad of Asian history. I'm going to give you the good and bad of white folk history. I'm going to give you the good and bad of Hispanic history.
Don't forget about that ugly, though. That ugly is worse than the bad.
Well, see, and so what I don't even want to get into what ugly is, but what I will say is that there's some stuff that just shouldn't be taught by a teacher in the classroom in the first place. That's something that they may have to talk to their mama or to their daddy or something else. You know what I'm saying? But as an educator, I feel like this is some stuff that I got to give them that will equip them to be better citizens in society to which we live in.
Exactly. So as an educator, you're shaping the young minds of today or the future minds of tomorrow, right? And with the information that you're providing to them, they have taken it upon themselves to apply it however way they see,
however they want to.
Exactly. Right. But you can only hope with the hopes that they're going to apply this in a more positive and productive way, hoping that they're going to open their minds to being more diverse rather
like
than
Dr. Henderson. Like Dr. Henderson said, science and research has already proven that it's going to have more of a positive impact than the negative one on the students to make a better tomorrow. And so you got to ask yourself, why is it that they would not want this information to be taught in the first place? Why would they try to create this whole coercion, this whole cloud of smoke as to this being this boogeyman of information, everything is CRT? You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, that like, you know, I'm sure that there's teachers who, you know, just gonna do what they're gonna, I'm positive teachers are gonna do what they want to do, while there's some other teachers who are afraid. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of researchers, and a lot of news media has already said, a lot of teachers, they're so afraid to teach, so they're leaving the profession altogether. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, it's just kind of getting ridiculous. And it make you wonder, because you got to ask yourself, these folks who are in these positions to pass these policies, their kids go to public schools?
Absolutely.
Their kids probably don't. And so their kids aren't affected by this stuff.
Absolutely.
So you know what I'm saying? So their kids still gonna get the high ACT scores. They said their kids still gonna get these, and their kids are still gonna go into these other, you know what I'm saying, higher education institutions and get the education and the jobs to which they need. It's only affecting those that's in these public school systems that don't have the same resources that they kids have. So, you know, when it really boils down to it, and I'm gonna stress this. We can have this conversation, but until we get some policy changes, so we get in place to where we, like me and Lewis, we can put our articles together, and we can get to these folks and get to policymakers and say, hey, this is why this is important. This information is important because it has more of a positive impact than a negative impact. Until we can change the educationalists, until we can change the superintendent's minds, until we can change the governors and the other policies' minds to make policies that's going to support the teaching of this information, ain't nothing really going to change.
Absolutely. And you know what? And to that point, Lewis, circling back to you about this, what has, from your perspective, what is eliminating Black history done for you as an educator when it comes to trying to be that person, trying to be that educator to enlighten your students about the real history of America? Because Black history is American history. And we oftentimes see in too many of these politicians, they want to parade around and basically show this pretty little lie about America, but they're doing the best that they can do with hiding the ugly truth about her. Right. So from your vantage point, what would you say, or how difficult is it for you to teach in the school district, knowing that they're taking away Black history, especially given the fact that Juneteenth is part of Black history?
All right. Well, I want to backdrop on something that Dr. Thompson said. There is a difference between critical race theory and culturally relevant teaching. They're two totally different things. So my research was pretty much culturally relevant teaching, specifically based upon the research of Zaretta Hammond and Dr. Tracy Weaver, who actually teaches in Miami-Dade County schools.
Oh, okay, cool.
So what I use their theories in my research, which centers around productive struggle. So what I'll say is this, and I'm in Mississippi, you know, we can't teach critical race theory, but it really pretty much goes back to our conversation that we had before we came online. I teach Black history, but like I told you last week, Mr. Williams, working at an all-Black school where other minorities, where you have white students that are a minority, one thing that I found out is that I would lose my white students when I just pretty much, and I guess you all, this might be offensive to y'all, but when I Blackwashed them to death.
Yeah,
So what you have to do, what any practitioner has to do if they have the right efficacy, they have to have a balance.
Yes.
So when I teach Black history, when I teach Hispanic history, I let the kids know this is a part of history. You take away from it whatever you want to take away from it. And so for the past 2 years, whenever we started talking about any culture, I always start with Cesar Chavez. And one of the reasons why I start with Cesar Chavez, because then I go to Menendez versus Westminster, and how the court case Menendez versus Westminster laid the groundwork for Thurgood Marshall to help with Brown versus the Board of Education, which is something I did not know. I did not know that until I did my research. And so one of the reasons why offline I told you all that I have a balanced viewpoint about it is because, as regarding to accepting other students' culture, is because when I presented my idea for my chapter 2 to my committee, they flat out told me, they said, Lewis, there's nothing wrong with wanting to put your research on Black students. You're a Black man, you teach at a Black school. And they painted a picture to me like this. Most Black students, most Hispanic students, and if you do some research, there was a lot of white people during the Civil War, during slavery, that was poor, that were treated just like Black slaves in the South. That's something I found out. That's where the word honky,
redneck comes from. Correct.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that until I did my research, until they made me go back and research. So one viewpoint of it is that any educator that teaches about race, they have to be fair and they have to be unbiased.
Exactly.
Not go into a classroom.
Absolutely.
And as a Black person, I cannot say it's unfair for Black people. It's like this, because I'm going to lose my white students. I might use my Latinx students. I might lose my Chinese students. So as a practitioner, practitioners have to be fair. They have to be unbiased. They have to present information where they're not slanted or not leaning any other kind of way. And so I'm going to be honest, as an educator that for 15 years, when I came out of Russ, and I'm not knocking Russ, I'm not knocking nothing that I learned. But when I came out of Russ, my first 2-3 years, I didn't teach like that. I didn't. I thought just like, this is Black, we was treated wrong, let's do this, let's do that. But it took some of my principles, and it took other people that say, hey, you're going to lose other people. So I think one of the reasons why, and I could be wrong, but I think one of the reasons why maybe politicians, maybe superintendents, maybe people feel a certain way about critical race theory is because if that person does not teach it from an unbiased viewpoint, and as again, I was guilty. I was guilty because when I first came out, that's how I taught it. And I'll never forget it. My first year teaching, I was over the Black History program. And my principal, he met with me and he said, Lewis, instead of making your program Black History, he said, why don't you make it multicultural? And I gave him all kind of pushback. All kind of pushback. No. And really, hindsight's 2020. I should have just said, yes, sir. Should have just went with it. And one of the reasons why he told me that is because if you make it multicultural, it's going to be unbiased for everybody because you have the opportunity to present everybody's culture. And to me, it's going to be hard to find teachers that's going to teach critical race theory and not teach it from an unbiased viewpoint.
Right. And that's and I want to chime in before you go, Marlon. So it's something that's lacking. And I agree with a lot of what Dr. Henderson was saying. But there's something to which teachers can do. And this is what I was able to find in my research. And it's something called cross-sectionality. Not only, so if I'm going to teach my students about the Holocaust of enslavement, I got to teach my students about debt peonage that Asians went through in America as they came and built the American railroads and helped establish the American West. I had to talk about the genocide that Native Americans went through across the Southeast region and the Trail of Tears and X, Y, and Z. I had to talk about the great farmers with Cesar Chavez and stuff like that out in California during the 1950s, 60s, and 70s or so. You know what I mean? If I'm going to talk about one group, and it's and be exclusive and exhaustive to them, I have to do it to every group, be exclusive and exhaustive to their struggles and what the teacher must do, because the content itself isn't going to do it. But like Lewis said, the teacher must do cross-sectionality. They must be able to, in so many words, they have to be able to take the information and make it relevant to each group of people, not only just in the classroom, but each group of people to which they're talking about. Here's how all of these, on the outside, we know how they're different, but on the inside, how do I connect them and how do I show that their struggles are similar to each other? What did they go through? What did the children go through? What did the women go through? What did the teens go through? What did the adults go through? You know what I'm saying? What was religion like? What was education like? Without being subjective to, you know what I'm saying, talking about, well, it only compares to that of Black people, but it also compares to that of white people, Asian people, Hispanic people, whatever group you're talking about. Try to draw connections between the groups, so that way we can all share each other's successes, we can all share each other's struggles, and we can be able to identify with those things, appreciate those things, and move forward with each other. And then when we encounter problems with each other, we can say, okay, well, look, in the past, I know that your group of people went through this and my group of people went through that. How can we overcome these things together? Cross-sectionality is important. And so, but another thing that I don't agree with, 2022, I ain't changing Black History Month to Multicultural History Month, bro. I'm just not.
Absolutely not. We're not. Listen, we already have the shortest damn month of the year anyway, but every month to me is Black History Month.
But hold on.
Hold on. He said change the program. Change the program. So instead of we're having a Black History program, he just said, can you change it to we're having a multicultural program? And so now this is what, and this is something that I wish I would have learned earlier on in my teaching career. I should have learned earlier on in my teaching career, it's not always good to give pushback when you don't agree.
Yeah, that's true. Because they telling you for a reason.
Now, as a person that has his doctorate, that's trying to break his way into administration, I clearly see why he said that. Mm-hmm. Because when you have news media outlets, in that particular case, I had the news media come in, I had the radio station came in, the mayor came in, certain dignitaries. There's a certain viewpoint or there's a certain agenda that you don't want to be perceived as pushing, because if you push a certain viewpoint, a certain agenda, you're going to lose certain people. So I clearly see what he was saying. And the school was not an all-Black school. If it was an all-Black school, it would have been fine. But it was a mixed school. So I understand what he was coming from. And also, there's a certain level of stress as a principal. If that gets pushed out, now you don't know how the community, you don't know how the stakeholders is going to view it. So it's too much. So I understand where he was coming from.
Right.
Absolutely. And I'll say this too. Obviously, the principles and practices in which education is implemented is also essential, just as much as importance as the education itself, right? So the educators themselves have to be able to learn or understand how to put forth that effort in educating young minds, not just giving them the information, but it's the way in which it's being delivered, right? The malice or lack thereof that's behind it. And I get that, but oftentimes I'm reminded of this, I forget what her profession was. I know she was in the post-secondary education realm. An older white lady. I always see these videos pop up of her doing a lecture, talking to an all-white audience. And she would sit up here and say that if you are okay with how Black people are treated in this country, everyone stand up. No one stood up. She was like, then you didn't understand the question. And she's like, okay, let me rephrase that. If you are aware of what Black people have gone through in this country, stand up. No one stood up. She said, okay, I'll ask another question then. Are you willing to do anything about the way Black people have been treated in this country? Stand up. Few of them did. It shows the lack of concern that you have, but you obviously have sympathy for what we've gone through. And I get, we have to be less aggressive with our approach when it comes to teaching Black history. But we can't sit up here and sugarcoat and sweet talk our way into incorporating Black history into the American history, the American education system, because we are a part of the American education system. And so for that being the case, we have to be able to be very incorporative when it comes to providing education to the American public about American history. And sometimes it does take some pushback, because if you think about the civil rights movement, that was all pushback. All of that was pushback. All of that was resistance. All of that was rebellion. You know what I mean? It took that for us to even get the bare minimum legislation being put in place that's now being reintroduced as another way of being eliminated from us now. Now, what was given to us 40, 50, 60 years ago is now on the table to renegotiate and say, well, now that we look at this, I don't know about this now. I don't think this would be a good idea to keep this going. The fact that we are living in a fucking country where we have to renew our voting rights, and because of the huge turnout that happened this past election, with the most Black people turning out to vote than it's ever been in American history, now you want to put all these different voter suppression bills in place to basically suppress our voices, suppress our votes, when we're citizens of this country too, and we deserve a right to be able to vote for whoever we want to vote for at that given point in time. And so I do feel like, to an extent, Louis, you make a very, very valid point when it comes to being able to hone in on the aggressiveness when it comes to the curriculum itself being dispersed and being given to our students of today. But we shouldn't have to sugarcoat it or sweet talk it or church our way around our history just to appease everyone else's minds, because our minds have been appeased all this time. We haven't been appeased. We've been marginalized for far too long to sit up here and be the ones now we're being deemed as the aggressors. Wait, so you get to apply all this aggression on us only to tell us that we are applying too much pressure or too much aggression to you because we just simply want to be included? They don't make sense.
That's not what I'm saying is that something Dr. Robson has told me in the past 3 years. There's a tactful way to address certain things.
Right.
And if you don't come across the way and address things in a tactful way, then it's not going to come across right. So I'm gonna just give you, and I don't know where this is gonna go, but because I don't know who all's gonna listen to this. So I'm gonna just give you a certain episode that happened to me 2 years ago. I had a certain white student, one of my favorite students, and he would tell me all the time, "Hey, Mr. Henderson, I'm here. I'm at this all Black school. I don't feel like I'm accepted. I have to do certain things to fit in. And I'm not going to go down the political realm or say a Democrat. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say what happened, and whoever takes it away can take it away because I don't want nothing to be misconstrued." Right. And I'm not talking about from you all, but I know someone might press play and everyone will say, "He said Robert," so I don't have time for that. But I will say this. When the things happened around January 6th, in the Capitol, he felt a certain way because of the candidate that he supported and how the students at school was treating him. Felt a certain way too, which is this: he was about to spaz out and lose it. And so one of the reasons why I say is it has to be done with tactful. And that's what I would tell my students. You might not agree with who he supports. You might not like who he supports. But look at how you're coming across to him. He already feels out of place because he's probably 1 to 10 school. So if you come at him combative, he's already got his guard up. So now he's going to come back and battle. And then in turn, I told him, I said, you can't come off combative no matter how you feel, because they're automatically going to box you in and say, "Hey, you are acting like how a certain person acts that's supposed to support a certain person."
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying when I'm saying you have to handle things tactfully. You have to see it unbiased. I had to see it from his viewpoint. Then I had to see it from my students' viewpoint. Then I had to play referee and say, "Hey, we have to find a better way to handle this, because guess what? It's not May 25th. So we still be sitting up in this classroom with each other. And we have to come and go that we have to cheat." So that's all that I'm saying. Yeah. And it's just you have to have a balance. You have to be able to tactfully handle situations. And I just don't, as a practitioner, I'm being brutally honest. I'm not knocking my HBCU. I'm not knocking my professors. I came out my first 3 to 5 years, I was teaching Black this, Black this, Black that. But what I found out is I lost certain students because it doesn't resonate to them. Yeah. So I had to find ways to resonate cultures with all students. That's pretty much what Anthony said. So at times, the pushback, it's kind of hard to compare what we're talking about, to the civil rights movement. In my opinion, I respect what you're saying, but it's just kind of hard.
Yeah.
Can I interject just very briefly?
Go ahead.
All right. So because I feel like there is some things that said, but they could be connected very well. The intersectionality or the cross-sectionality of being able to teach, multiple cultures. Sometimes it don't even have anything to do, like Lewis said, it don't have anything to do with politics at all. You know what I mean? If you can if you can get to the root of very basic things that makes humans, family, education, what I'm saying? Some things that we all kind of tend to value. We may value in different ways, and we may have different takes on what those things actually mean, as far as different cultures are concerned, but we do value them because it's what makes us human. You know what I mean? And so if we could try to draw the connections between those things amongst all our students in the classroom, I'll give you an example, and I gotta go after I make this comment. But I'll say this, is that I remember doing the African American history program, and I had a few white students at my school. And because I know my content so well, I understood that there were some allies within the white community that helped out the Black community during some times. And so you have to be able to write roles or write positions for them to be able to participate. You know what I mean? Lyndon Baines Johnson, for all that he was worth, was very much a white man that helped pass that legislation that JFK could not pass because he had the wherewithal to get the legislation passed. You know what I mean? He was a whole white dude. You know what I'm saying? Let's take it back even further. He didn't want to, though.
He had to push back himself. Yeah.
Yes, he did. But you had John Brown, who was a whole white zealot to some people. That went and killed a whole bunch of other white people. You know what I'm saying? To make sure that Black folks had the opportunity to try to gain freedom. You know what I mean? And so, you even go back further than that. You have, Lemuel Graves. You had all of these other, you know what I'm saying? Either biracial or white people or people outside of the African American community or Black community that played roles to help the Black community. There's just like there were people that were Black that made roles, and you just got to do your research and find to help the Hispanic community, to help the Asian community. And so there's this narrative within American history that these groups of people are isolated, and they're not. We lived amongst each other and we did these things amongst each other, and we have to find those things to be able to show that we worked together. I won't say that there won't be a need for Hispanic Heritage Month or African American History Month, because there will be, because that's how we show appreciation for those cultures. The Asian and Pacific Islander Month. That's how the nation shows appreciation for those groups of people. We appreciate who you are and we love who you are and thank you for you being you. That's what that's for. However, that don't mean that I can't participate in that month. That means that they can't participate in that month, because there's a history of us helping each other out in this country. And if we don't talk about and do what we need to do to show that we helped each other, then that's the demise of all minority people as a whole. That's the demise of Black folks to say that I don't want white folks to help us out. You know what I'm saying? That's the demise of the Asian folks to say they don't want Hispanic folks to help them out. That's to the demise of them. The moment that we can realize that we share a common ancestry, share a common culture, and share a common history, and share common successes, the moment we figure that out, the better we all will be. And that's all I got, y'all. I got to roll. Okay. I love y'all, man. I love you, Lou. Love you, Marlon, man. I'll talk to y'all. And
really appreciate you for being on the show, man. And definitely we'll be talking to you soon again. And we'll be having more discussions about this as time progresses, because, again, we're bringing awareness to this, hoping that we can come up with some actionable items to effectively go into effect and make it applicable to our everyday lives. So, again, man, I really appreciate you for being on the show.
Peace, man. Peace.
All right. Last question to you, Lou, before we wrap up. For me, I will say this. I do feel as if, though, obviously, I'm never one to shy away from wanting, white allies, Hispanic allies, or anything like that, because, again, from a minority standpoint, from a multicultural standpoint, we all do need to help each other out in our own efforts to make sure that our history, our heritage is being taught and being broadcast and highlighted and celebrated, in most cases, right? But it starts with the powers that be that made it possible for us to have to do this in the first place, right? So again, when I think about it, I'm never on the record saying that every white person is racist, every white person is bad. Absolutely not. I know that. But my thing is challenging them to use their white privilege as a way to help make it an equal playing field for all of us. If you're not willing to jeopardize that by helping us, then how much do you really care? How much do you really sympathetic to the plight of Black people in terms of how we've been treated over the course of period of time in this country or in this world for that matter? If you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is, and not necessarily money in this particular instance, but just your action, if you're not willing to fight for us, if you're not fighting with us in terms of fighting the systems that exist, the systematic oppression and institutions that still exist in this very moment in time, if you're not willing to fight against those systems and institutions, then how can you truly say you really care about our well-being and our place in this country? You know what I mean? So I want to wrap, my last question, wrapping up with this, I want to say to you, which is actually this question, what should we be doing now that we have such thing as Juneteenth as a national holiday? What should be our next steps in terms of making sure that we're incorporating Black history in general to our curriculum, to our everyday lives, and also as we incorporate our history, then we can start trickling down to the other histories as well. Because I'm always one who's been on record saying that I can't help the whole world just yet. I gotta start with my own household and then start helping the rest of the neighborhood. I can't go backwards. I can't help the neighborhood and I ain't even helped my own home yet. So we have to be able to start from somewhere. And this is not about being anti anything, but it is about being pro-Black. And I am pro-Black because first and foremost, I am a Black man. I'm gonna stand up for us first. That's not to say that I'm not standing up for anybody else's cause or efforts or fights, but I have to make sure that my people first are getting the very things that we need essentially to help us grow and progress in this everyday life before I can help anybody else's fights and efforts to do the same thing, right? So again, what should we be doing now that we have this as a national holiday? What are our next steps in terms of making sure that our history gets put out there, not necessarily deeming anyone as a negative or evil person or devil or whatever, but just merely acknowledging the fact that this is what took place, and in order for us not to let it happen again, this is what we have to do. To your point.
I think it just comes down to being culturally aware of the plight that you went through and having the understanding and pretty much saying, hey, this is what happened. We know this is what happened. What are we going to do so we don't go backwards? And I think it just really stems down to what we've been talking about all day, talking about it, understanding it from a unbiased and unscripted viewpoint, being able to have those conversations. I know we talked about how we used to have those talks in Anthony's room, but I remember those talks, and I don't really remember none of us really agreeing on anything.
I won't say anything. We disagreed.
We didn't agree on a lot of things.
Though. Yeah.
We agreed on something, but there was a lot of things we didn't agree upon. But I could always remember this, that we would do certain things around campus to try to change the culture and change the environment around us. Try to do certain things in Holly Springs. And I think it just starts with a mindset. You have to have the mindset to want to improve your culture. You got to have the culture capacity, and you have to be willing to do the work. Yep. So one thing that I think me and Dr. Thompson has pretty much said is, as a teacher, it's hard to do the work to understand all students' cultures, to put it out there, because you have to put blinders on your own thoughts and feelings. And so a lot of times that's the pushback that a lot of teachers face. And here recently, I've really learned that that's something that I had to do. I had to put blinders on my own viewpoints and on my own thoughts and my own beliefs. And I had to see why student A has this perception, why student B has this perception. And I mean, I really don't think there's no right or wrong way to answer that question, but people just have to be willing just to do the work. And if you're willing to do the work and you're going about the work the right way, then it'll pan out for you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Like I said before, I'm of the mindset that once we're able as Black people to get ourselves established in terms of being respected and acknowledged in this world, and then I can move forward. From that point on, I can start being an advocate for other fights and other rights and things of that nature. But I can't do theirs first and not do ours, because we have so much that we have to fix. We have so many things that we have to accomplish that we haven't accomplished yet, or haven't accomplished enough in its entirety to where I can't focus my attention on someone else's cause of fight when my own cause of fight hasn't even been executed yet. And so that has to be taken into account.
And I'll say this because, you know, we had extensive talk off air.
Yeah.
And I understand why you made a valid point. You understand why I had a viewpoint of why I view things, because where I was born and raised, how I grew up. And I understand why you view the same things, or how you have the mindset and the thoughts that you have being from Chicago. I mean, I have family from Chicago, Dalton, Chicago Heights, the South Side. You know, I understand all that. My grandma, my great-grandma grew up in the original Jonathan Taylor homes. So I understand why you viewpoint certain things, but not to try to turn it and change into a spiritual realm. It's like always what we was talking about. My viewpoint is this. When you look at a person from a certain viewpoint and you hate them because of their skin color, my pastor has always said it. It's sin, not skin. To hate somebody because of their viewpoint is sin. And it's deeper than a black and white issue, because if you look at it from a biblical standpoint, I'm not no pastor by no means, but Cain killed Abel. Hitler gassed Jews. There was Africans and Africans that sold other slaves into slavery. Right now, Ukraine, that's white on white. So it's deeper than a skin color. I hate you for your skin color. It's sin. And I strongly want you, if you get an opportunity, to reach out to Mr. Parker, because I was so, like I told you last week, I was so happy that Mr. Parker told my students, and Mr. Parker is Emmett Till's cousin, that us as Black people, we will be in an uproar if something happens in the Black community. Or I'm sorry, if somebody white does something to somebody Black. But we don't have the same uproar when it comes down to Black on Black. And there's been white, and I had to admit it, there has been white people that have paved the way, and that has helped us to get where we're at. Now, it might not be the progress that I might not agree with. It might not be the progress that Anthony might agree with, and it might not be the progress that you might not agree with. But I mean, it's something. But it's bigger and it's deeper than just skin color.
No, absolutely. And you know what? My last point to that too, as I'll say, is that now I don't agree with the fact that it's not a huge uproar when it comes to Black on Black crime, because obviously that term is based on proximity. It's not based on race per se. You kill what's around you, and because of the systemic institutions that obviously are barriers that has basically compelled us to be in these types of environments, as very impoverished environments, no less. We're unable to actually really advance when it comes to that. Being a product of impoverished neighborhood and growing up in Inglewood and Chicago, I can tell you that seeing these different crimes happen, I'm not justifying any crime whatsoever, because we're oftentimes advocating to stop the violence, advocating to cease fire, advocating to put the guns down all the time, especially in Chicago, especially in places like Atlanta, especially in Memphis and New Orleans and things of that nature. So you see Black people who are fighting that fight too. My thing is, as a Black man, I feel like we're fighting too many damn fights and ain't winning one of them. We haven't won one yet. We're fighting each other, we're fighting ourselves, and then we're fighting the systems that be too. But we have to pick and choose which fight we're going to fully invest in 100% of ourselves in, and so that we can actually accomplish that victory and win in that fight. And we haven't done that just yet, because our minds are in so many different areas and places, and we're turning every which way to see where the issue is. The issue is here. It's a multifaceted areas of issues that we have to deal with. And I get that. But my point is, in regards to understanding that the powers that be, they have put these systems together for us to actually be in these animalistic environments where we're killing each other. When we should automatically by now say to ourselves, hey man, listen, Black man, I'm not your enemy. You're not my enemy. But we have to do away with that negative mindset. But and it starts with the choice. It starts at home for us teaching our kids how to conduct themselves and be able to treat other people. And I've oftentimes said this on this show that from a humanity standpoint, and I'm on record saying this, I feel like the older I get, the more I realize humanity is full of shit. Because everyone's a nice person, Lewis, until it requires you to be a nice person. And it's the fact that we can't even grasp the concept of the basic elements of being a human being, which is respecting each other, regardless of good, bad, or indifferent, regardless of our viewpoint, regardless of our religious beliefs, political beliefs. We're living in a time now that our political beliefs and religious beliefs can actually basically sway us away from each other and say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this person anymore based on who they voted for, based on what they believe in. And because times are so sensitive now that we have to get to a place where we're having these types of discussions to basically amend these types of relationships because of the fact that so many other things have been hindering us from growing, that we need to acknowledge what those hindrances are so that we can actually come up with an executable plan to move forward together and not separately. Again, I don't always agree with the aspect of integration. I felt like in some aspects we were better off being segregated. But obviously when I see new things happening, I do also realize that being multicultural and being diverse helps the world grow and progress in a more positive way. And so we as Black people have a part to play in this growth and development in humanity, but we have to first start with our own first. And so, and that's what this particular show is oftentimes preaching about. When I'm on the show talking to different people about these different things, because it starts with us. And then once we get to a place where we're satisfied with the progress we've made, now it's time to move to something else, move to the next thing that we have to work on. Because again, there's more than enough shit that we got to fix and worry about fixing. So, and that's going to be a progressive, montage, if you will. It's going to be something that's going to forever be ongoing, but we have to all do our part in doing so. Thank you again, Lewis, man. Shout out to Dr. Anthony Thompson again, who had to jump off for being on the show to talk to me about this issue, about the celebration and acknowledgement of Juneteenth, and giving somewhat of a backstory and history about Juneteenth for those of you who don't know what it is. And it's unfortunate that the world is still coming to grips with the understanding of what Juneteenth actually represents. And so I do encourage all my listeners, whether you're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, whatever, I encourage you and challenge you to go research this. Research this the very day, June 19th, 1865. Understand what this symbolizes, understand what this truly means when it comes to Black history in America, which is American history, and be able to have an open mind about what it is that you're learning about, because us as Black people, we want to be treated and acknowledged with the same fairness and equality that everyone else is in this world, preferably in this country. So again, Dr. Henderson, thank you again, my brother, for being on this show. We're definitely I'm looking forward to having you and Dr. Anthony Thompson and Dr. Robinson again on the show again, talk more about these issues in depth, and definitely look forward to many more topics like this, man. I appreciate your time, and we'll definitely be circling back again. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you like, share, subscribe to this episode and previous episodes. Make sure you subscribe to my podcast channel on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, on my YouTube page. All those wonderful things, man. I'm talking to Black men and women about these different cultural issues that is plaguing our Black community, from truly growing into the real culture, the loving culture and welcoming culture that we can ultimately become. And so we have to all do our part in playing, but we have to all do our part in making sure that is even possible to this day. So again, thank you for the time, brother. And we'll be talking again soon.
All right. Appreciate it.
All right. If you like what you've heard from this week's episode and would like to hear more from previous episodes, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel below. You can also find me on social media platforms at Speak to the Mic _podcast show on Instagram and Speak to the Mic podcast show on Facebook. Be sure to also like, share, and subscribe to my Spotify page at Speak to the Mic Podcast Show. As I put out more thought-provoking content, your opinion and thoughts are needed and appreciated. I thank you all in advance for your support and look forward to hearing from you soon.